Thank you, Doctor, for coming by and talking to us about an important issue that we have kind of been grappling with in this area, and that is biomass and how it affects people's health.
The issue here is that burning biomass, there's more data on burning wood than there is on burning grass, which is part of the proposal here in this city, is that it's certainly going to raise significant health hazard issues because of the release of NOx and particulates, among other things. Burning grass is going to produce significant amounts of dioxins. In fact, this isn't really a sustainable economic model, because right now all of these plants are very dependent on a significant amount of taxpayer subsidies, grants, tax credit incentives, which in this current economic climate I don't think are reasonable, especially when this is being sold as clean and green power, but in fact it is not clean, it is not green.
I'm going to ask a stupid question from someone who doesn't know anything about this topic at all, and that question is going to be, don't we breathe in particulates all the time?
Yes, we do, but that's part of the issue is, at this point, the explosion, it's literally an explosion in medical literature. If you go to PubMed, which is a public access site, and you type in particulates and you ask for all the articles since 2005, you will literally get something in the neighborhood of 4,000. And a lot of it is about the fact that the levels that we're already exposed to, we know now are significant factors in cancer causation. We know that they are significant factors in terms of cardiorespiratory disease for lots of people. The American Lung Association has come out and said that they think the current level of exposure is responsible for literally tens of thousands of deaths a year. So why add to it? As a pediatrician, what I'm equally concerned with is that we now have unequivocal evidence that current level of exposure, let alone increased level of exposure, causes respiratory disease such as asthma in kids. We now know that it is related to causing certain types of congenital defects in children. We now have very suggestive evidence that it's probably related to a number of other cognitive and mental function issues, such as perhaps the rise in ADHD. It may be related to the sudden increase in the last 10 to 15 years in autism. Particulates affect every bioregulatory system in the body. They are very, very scary, and right now the medical science just booming in terms of our knowledge of them, but the regulations haven't caught up. So that the proponents of the plant, or the people in the city, would look at it and say, well, they're going to get the permits, therefore it must be safe. Well, that's not true any longer, and we know it's not true any longer. Now, the question is, in terms of the community, can you actually buy power cheaper than you can produce it here at a relatively small scale plant? And I don't know the answer to that because I haven't seen the numbers that they're projecting in terms of the actual operation of this proposed plant. But in terms of coal, coal certainly has its problems. Coal relatively is certainly dirtier than wind, solar, or geothermal, and those are other issues which certainly ought to be looked at in terms of the community and what do you actually need to do here and what's going to produce a sustainable economy. Because, for instance, the Teamsters Union, which ought to be interested in biomass combustion because it required a lot of trucking, they came out last year with a definitive statement that said they don't think that biomass combustion is a good deal, and you get a lot more jobs and a lot more sustainable economic benefits from expanding recycling programs and being more aware of energy efficiency. Now that's the Teamsters who are in trucking. So again, there are lots of questions here about whether biomass is really economically sustainable, and right now the Biomass Power Association in the last 2 years has unequivocally many times come out and look at their webpage, and they say that they simply cannot operate without the current levels of financial subsidies. I testified before the Senate Finance Committee in February of last year, and the number that the staff came up with is, if all the plants go forward that are currently proposed, the federal government will be on the hook for something in the neighborhood of $200 billion, that's B, billion dollars of taxpayer money to subsidize these plants. Without that money, they can't operate. They won't be able to survive.
it doesn't work economically.
No.
So we've got two problems. We've got a health issue, which is more important, but then we've got a physical problem too. So on both of those levels, biomass strikes out.
Yes, and one of the things that I hate to have to say this, but it is true these days, is the health issue is two-tiered as well. It's not only people being sicker, or people getting sick, or people getting cancer because of exposure to particulates, many of which won't necessarily just come from this plant, but as we learned in the last year and a half, that's money. Somebody's going to have to pay for this. And part of what is an issue here is that the people who run the plant aren't going to be responsible for paying for the increased health costs incurred by the community. People like yourself and Chris and everybody, they're the people who are going to be paying for it. So that the medical cost piece here is significant. Again, the American Lung Association has come out and estimated that particulate exposure roughly costs the country $22 billion a year in medical costs just related to pulmonary disease alone, and that's only the beginning of what's going on. Science clearly points in the last 2 years to the fact that biomass combustion, this is not biofuels, it's not lots of other things, it's biomass combustion to generate electricity is in fact not safe for the environment, it is not climate neutral, it's a health risk, and therefore we can't afford to waste billions and billions of dollars every year subsidizing this. We have much better ways to spend our energy in terms of really producing clean energy like solar and wind, etc., which do require subsidies at the moment to remain viable. But as the scale increases, they'll get cheaper. It'll be a much better way to go for this community and for the country as a whole.
Okay, very good. Very good. I like that. Thank you, sir, for your time.